So I will pass over to Dominic now, and thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Hannah. I'm Dominic McGonigal. I'm the chair of Governors for Schools. And this is almost our last session in this conference. We've had 5,000 attendees, which is an incredible sort of credit, I think, to the sector and the sort of the keenness of governors and trustees. And it's not just governors and trustees. We've got governance experts on the professionals in the conference, people from industry and business and other education sector leaders. And of course, we know that all of our governors are skilled. That's a major attribute. We also know that we're a very diverse bunch because we're governors of schools. We're placing 35% of our governors are under the age of 35. 7% have a disability, and we've got 35% from ethnic minorities. So we've got a good spread, as well as having the essential skills, which are so valuable to schools. So this session, we're looking at, what does the sector need? And we've got 4 very experienced panelists with us, all governors and trustees in their own right, but all of whom have done more than just given their services as a governor or trustee. They've all gone beyond looking at how we can attract more skilled governors into our governing boards to impact schools. What does that mean for employers, and how can schools access this fantastic resource? And of course, we are right in the middle of the political conference season, so our political leaders are all thinking about their manifestos. So it's rather a timely discussion for us to have this this conversation, because I think it's not just about what we want as a sector, but it's also what we want from government as well. So I'm going to ask each of our panelists to sort of introduce themselves and give their perspective on what the sector needs. Asif, if I can start with you. Asif is strategic cyber intelligence at Barclays Bank, and he uses this position to work very closely with governors for schools in getting a lot of really skilled governors into the sector. So, Asif, over to you.
Hi, thank you for having me today. So, my name's Asif. Yes, I work as a strategic cyber intelligence analyst. I've been in the banking industry working for one specific bank for over 19 years. And I feel, I've been a governor for just over a year now, starting the new academic year this month. But I feel that being a governor over a year as a parent has opened my eyes to a lot of things. Bringing to the table, I think, the experience that I've had within banking, and it's not only just banking, it's looking at the digital safety side of things, cyber security, cyber safety, and bringing the knowledge that I have from what I do as a day-to-day job, and being able to educate kids, students at an early stage in their sort of academic journey, and giving them the sort of advantage of knowing what's going on now. Somebody as a teacher can provide everything that they need, but what kids tend to do is when somebody externally comes in and gives their experience, they tend to listen more and want to know more because it's an interesting job or it's an interesting background that they're interested in. So being able to do that has really helped, and I'm sure the school appreciate what I've been able to do for them as well. So that's really my perspective of it and what I think.
Thank you. And now turn to Sam, if I may. Sam Bailey is Deputy Head of Widening Participation at LSE, and I know he's done a huge amount of work to get more governors into schools. So Sam, over to you.
Good evening. Thank you very much for having me here. As introduced, my name's Sam. I'm Deputy Head of Widening Participation at the London School of Economics and Political Science. And what we're all about in the Widening Participation team is really making sure that talented students from every background can access LSE and the world-class education, but also other top universities, of which we're lucky enough to have loads in the UK. So I've been a governor in a North London sixth form college since November 2021. Time is absolutely flying by, and it's been absolutely brilliant to kind of experience another angle of the education system, students earlier than we see them when they're at university, but working with other people who are just as passionate about social mobility, about education and the power of education and the system working together to really change people's lives. So I've got a lot out of that. But I hope that I've also been able to kind of bring some of those skills and my knowledge of what happens to students after they're at school or at sixth form, where they go on to and their destinations, to hopefully kind of empower school leadership, teachers and other school staff to really make sure that all of their students have those successful outcomes. One of the things that we've been doing at LSE, and we've been had the pleasure of working with Governors for Schools, as well as Ipsos and TASO, who are the What Works Centre for Transforming Access and Student Outcomes in Higher Education, is really to understand the impact of governance volunteers who come from LSE, our staff and our alumni, really understand, well, if they become a governance volunteer, they're helping schools and colleges, what's the impact of that? What kind of outcomes do they get? What do they benefit from? What do the schools get from them? And what are the kind of hopeful long-term impacts on the students' outcomes? That's what we're really looking for. So that's one of the things we've been doing is hopefully encouraging our staff and alumni to become governance volunteers, because we know they have a passion for social mobility, social justice across the social sciences that we study here at LSE. But we also know they have skills in data analysis, in strategy, and all these other things that they can bring together. And I think has a really valuable role to add to the skills and knowledge on school governing boards, on trustee boards, to really kind of have a positive contribution. So that's a bit of background. That's a bit of kind of what we've been working on. And I think that's what the education sector really needs to be looking at for effective governance.
Thank you. And I'll just hand over to John in a minute, but if you could contribute yourself on the chat or the Q&A, if you've got any comments on what the sector needs to ensure boards are fit for purpose, and any questions for the panelists, please just pop them into the Q&A or the chat, and we'll be sort of picking those up as we go along. So over to you, John. So John Coles is the CEO of United Learning Trust, which is one of the largest MATs in the country. John, I think you've got, was it 90 schools or maybe more? Anyway, yeah, I'm sure you'll tell us. And he was also on Radio 4 this morning talking about absenteeism, which is one of the issues that boards are having to tackle. So John, over to you, your thoughts on what the sector needs.
Thanks, Dominic. Yes, and thanks for inviting me. Thanks for having me here. Problem with being on radio first thing in the morning is that you get to this time of day and you're flagging a bit. But very nice to be here. United Learning is, I think, the largest group of schools in the country. We're about 95 schools now across the length of the country, not quite the breadth of the country, but we run from Carlisle in the north right down to the south coast. And all of our schools have local governing bodies, and sometimes you hear about trusts which I think ill-advisedly, in my view, move away from having local governing bodies for all their schools. We've always felt that having a local governing body for each of our schools is hugely important, and that what governors can do, which is separate from what trust boards can do, and what the executive of an academy trust like ours can do, is extremely valuable. And I think, our trust board obviously is is the board of quite a large organisation. We turn over about £600 million a year. We have 10,000 staff, 65,000 children in our schools. And so obviously, you know, their focus is mostly at an organisational level rather than at a school level. It's critical that those people are good non-executives, and part of being a good non-executive is really understanding what is going on within the organisation as a whole. So they do spend time in schools and meeting people, of course, beyond the central team. But what they don't do, which I think our local governing bodies do, is bring detailed, specific local knowledge into the conversation about each school. And our heads are actually line managed by a team of regional directors, and those regional directors are by and large educational experts. So they have been very successful heads, executive heads often as well, know what it takes to lead a really excellent school and understand school improvement pretty deeply. Whenever they engage with the school, though, in a kind of formal way, through one of our regular review and support visits, or you know, in performance management of heads and so on, the chair of governors is always very much part of that conversation and that discussion. And the heads, I think, value that two-way relationship, including you know, talking to a chair of governors who has a deep understanding of the school, who often understands in a different way what parents and the local community will be thinking, what are the issues that are going on in the community, what is really on the head's mind and worrying them away from the task of school improvement. And that those chairs, like the whole of the local governing body, you know, can act as a sounding board, provide that critical friend role, do a challenge and support function on, you know, all matters relating to the running of a school, whether that is educational, financial, about people and development. So it seems to me that on a governing body in a large trust like ours, in a freestanding school, in a small trust, I think you've got similar demands of a local governing body or governing body, and therefore of the governors. And I would include things that are difficult to develop. I think often areas where training and development is often valuable. Firstly, in being an effective non-executive, if I can put it like that. To be a good governor, you have to be good at the challenge and support role, at asking great questions, at being a critical friend, at understanding what influences the running of a school, without yourself then taking over the operational running and management of the school. And that's a kind of set of non-executive skills which you know, need reflection, need development, need training, typically when people first take that sort of a role. And secondly, often the value of specialist skills in the running of a school. And I think that's particularly true where you have smaller schools, schools which are not part of big trusts, and where, you know, if you're talking about a primary school, often the head will have to be, you know, a jack of all trades often, and heads are often expected to know a huge amount about finance, about HR, about technology, data, marketing, as well as educational improvement. And there aren't too many people in the country who have, you know, fantastic expertise in every single one of those areas. And so, you know, the role of governor as free source of wise advice, if I can call it that, is, I think, really meaningful and important in a large number of schools. So I'll stop there. There's much more to be said about this topic, but I think that mix of specialist skills, and I don't think there's any one specialist skill which is more important than any other, the ability to ask great questions, to be an effective non-executive, to contribute well to a board, and to engage well with educational experts are at the heart of being an effective governor, in my view.
Thank you very much, John. Now, we were due to hear from Jess Bates, who's done some amazing work at Atkins, which is an engineering company. So she's done a huge amount of work getting on the STEM side of getting sort of engineering and science experts onto boards. But unfortunately, she's a victim of all of us governors and trustees being volunteers, and unfortunately, work has intervened and says she has to do something for Atkins rather than for us. But that's a good example of some of the challenges of having this resource that is voluntary, of course. So over to you, Hannah. I know you work very closely with Jess. You might be able to tell us a little bit about some of the work she's been doing. But in particular, we obviously want to hear your perspective as a governor, but also as the CEO of Governors for Schools, recruiting governors, chairs of governors, trustees, and now I'm sure you'll tell us about the pathway to governors of getting a new batch of governors into the system. So, Hannah.
Absolutely, thank you, Dominic. Yes, lots to cover then. Well, yeah, as hopefully all of you will be aware, Governors for Schools is a national charity, and our aim is to really recruit and place volunteers onto governing boards who bring those skills that John mentioned. Absolutely, finance is still always asked for, HR is asked for, marketing, change leadership. Local community links is being asked for more and more, we're seeing. And so I think that's a real key aspect, especially for local governing boards. And that's really where Atkins and other organisations that like Atkins that we work with come in, because they provide us with a ready source of volunteers who can bring those industry links, the knowledge, and a supportive employer along with them to their governance role. So they're all given time off for volunteering duties. Atkins Realis now, they also provide resources which their governors can tap into and they can bring to the schools. So it's not just Atkins that we work with many other partners, over 20, as well, over 20 corporate partners, as well as a number of universities, like Sam mentioned, LSE being one of them, but many others across the country. And that's really where we tap into the volunteers that we recruit from. Because we work with those organisations, it means that we recruit a different demographic, I would say, than the average governing board looks like. We recruit a lot younger volunteers, as Dominic said at the beginning. 37% of our volunteers last year were under 35. So we're really broadening the appeal, hopefully, to encourage younger people to take up the role and see that it's an opportunity that's available for them. I think more often than not we hear, oh, I didn't know that I could do that. I thought I had to be a parent or I had to be a teacher. Those myths still exist out there, and we're really aiming to dispel those in the conversations that we have with new volunteers. As Dominic says, we don't just do governor recruitment, we also do trustee recruitment. So looking at looking for trustees for multi-academy trusts and single academy trusts to sit on their boards. And we've also just launched our chair recruitment service because we know it's such a challenge for people. Sorry, I hope you can't hear the phone ringing in the background. Chair recruitment is such a challenge for people. And so we're aiming to support the sector by finding suitable people for those roles. As Dominic mentioned, we have just started some work called Pathway to Governance, and this is really key for us because we believe that we want to increase the diversity around governing boards, the different perspectives, and we know that some of the people that we speak to and some of the best people that we speak to actually just lack the confidence to take up the challenge. And we know they have the skills and the ability to sit on a board, but they don't quite see themselves in that role for whatever reason. We were fortunate to partner with Amazon and ran a pilot to provide an immersive experience for people who were potentially interested in the governor role but didn't think it was for them. We gave them early access to training. We ran mock board meetings online so that they got to feel what it was all about. And then we supported them with their application, and many of those people are now in roles, and Amazon are doing a second round of Pathway to Governance, and we're speaking to other partners as well to bring different people into the sector, I think. Regarding what boards need to be fit for purpose, I think we absolutely need the skills that Sir John mentioned. We also need the time commitment from volunteers, people who understand the role when they start. I think it's really key that people have had information before they take up the role. We don't want people to start and leave within 6 months. We want them to understand what they're stepping into. We provide lots of information before they begin. We also want them to be supported once they're in role. So we want them to have a buddy that they can go to on their governing board. We want them to have a governance professional who can answer their questions, or a clerk who can support them, or a chair who can support them. So I think that's really key for us, because what we want is, we do a lot of work to find the right people, and we know that recruitment is a massive challenge across the country, pretty much everywhere outside of London, I think. If we find them, we want to keep them. We want people to be motivated to stay. If they've signed up in the first place, how can we make sure that they are engaged, they feel that, and they see the impact that they are having, to make them stay and have a lifelong career, hopefully, in school governance. Obviously not all at the same school, that wouldn't be great practice, but yeah, hopefully they'll have a long career in governance.
Good, thank you very much, Hannah. Right, I'm now going to pose a question for all the participants on this this seminar, because you're all involved in governance, and you're all, thank you, showing a lot of commitment, which is great, and the schools have really benefit, I think, from our input. So two questions really. One is, what kind of governors do you want for your governing board? What skills do you want? What other attributes? John mentioned being a really good NED. Hannah mentioned the time availability, etc. So what kind of governors do you want? And do you find it easy to find those governors? Is there a challenge in recruiting the right sort of governors? So if you could sort of pop something in the chat, that would be most welcome. And I'm going to pose that question to our panelists as well. So what kind of governors do we want? What kind of governors really make a difference to a school? And is there a challenge in finding those governors? So who wants to kick off?
I think I don't mind going first.
Asif, go on.
Yeah, with the the experience over the last year joining as a governor, I think the vast amount of experience that people can bring to the table, the better. People coming from different areas of different businesses can really help. What was sort of alluded to earlier is, you don't necessarily have to be a teacher, you don't necessarily have to be someone in the academic section. You can just come in and share what you've learned and what you experience in your sort of day-to-day role. And that, for me, that was a sort of a changing moment in wanting to become a governor, because I sort of saw the advertisement of a governor wanted through work, through one of the channels at work, curious about it, and then spoke to a colleague who was an actual governor and asked these questions around, do you have to be a teacher? What could I possibly take to the table? Why would they want me of all people? And that person, knowing the work that I've done and the journey I've been on, said you could really help, and really broke it down to exactly what I could share and be able to help the school with. And I think if we are advertising, if we are sharing opportunities for governors, it's highlighting that, understanding that you don't really have to be a teacher, and whatever experience you have, anything can help the school, or anything can help as a governor to bring that to the table and to actually share it with the school. So that is my thought of it.
Thanks. John, have you got thoughts on that? I know you have.
Yeah, so I mean, in thinking about my own board, of my organisation, which is kind of a helpful analogue, I think there are some things which are trade-offs and balances. So, for example, I think it's really useful to have people on the board who are currently actively at work and are now today, doing something significant and are live, actors in an executive role. On the other hand, people who are in busy jobs inevitably have less time than, for example, somebody who's recently retired from work. So that's just one example of the sort of trade-offs that you have, and therefore it's really important that you have the right range of people on your board. So sometimes it's not about what particular skills does this individual bring, so much as, how are we building the capability of the board as a whole. Yes, we do want people who bring financial expertise or educational expertise or HR expertise. Yes, we do want some people who've got a significant amount of time. Yes, we do want some people who are currently out in the world of work and very busy. Right, what's the best mix of those people, and how do we bring them together with that, that diverse range of experiences and knowledge and other forms of diversity, which mean that they will, represent the communities we serve and bring good local knowledge, and so on and so on. So I think part of the skill, and we ask our chairs to do quite a lot of this work in terms of building the board. Part of the skill of being a chair is thinking hard about how do we find the right people, to grow the capability of the board as a whole, and then how do we train and develop this whole board to make it more effective than the sum of its parts, as it were. I put a lot of emphasis, as you'll tell from that, on the role of the chair in running the board. And I think there's a risk in education that heads feel they sort of have to manage their governing bodies. And I try strongly to discourage people from doing that. I think that really only happens when you've got somebody in the chair who, isn't quite right for being the chair of a board and isn't quite able to run the board themselves. Well, I think what you want on a governing body is to be confident that the head runs the school, but the chair runs the governing body. And so having that person with that right set of chairing skills and, strategic ability, I think is an absolutely crucial enabler of having a good board. If you don't have the right chair and somebody who's got the ability to run the board and build the board, then you struggle to put together a good board, however capable the individuals are.
Thank you. And we've got a couple of very nice comments coming through as well. We've got, just paraphrasing, if you'll excuse me, Paul Carney has said that diversity of perspectives is crucial. I totally agree. Having different perspectives and different skills that coming together, and I'm so pleased to see actually now the sort of the diversity of our governors is changing, which is very good to see. Then Sandra talks about prizing passion for education. I think passion is crucial. Certainly, for all the NED roles that I've had, I always see passion for the organisation, for the business or whatever it is as absolutely key. And then James is talking about increasing scrutiny and spotlight locally and nationally, and being driven by interest groups. So seeing more engagement, not always positive, from these groups, and obviously a governing board is crucial in dealing with that, with the head, because it's a very important role in carrying the sort of ethos and vision of the school and defending that, actually. So keep those comments coming. Sam, your thoughts.
Thank you very much. I think one thing that strikes me about the board I'm on at the moment is, perhaps it's particularly valuable for a sixth form college in that kind of in-between space between pre-16 education and then the wider world of further education colleges, universities, etc. is that we've got such a diversity of representatives from other local education institutions on the board. So we've got some feeder secondary schools, from some further away. We've got some FE colleges. We've got at least 2 universities in there. And I think this really adds to that kind of longer term view of students' progression through their short time at a sixth form college. That's really, really valuable. Where are they coming from? What are we seeing coming our way in a few years' time? But also then, what are the opportunities? What's the landscape after they've been with us at the sixth form college? Where can they head? What's looking out there? So that kind of, everyone's got that shared understanding of the importance of education. Everyone has that common basis, but they're able to look in a different way at what they're seeing. And I think that's brought real skills in kind of interrogating some of what the data that's presented, some of what we're being told, looking at it in a different way, picking out different patterns and trends, that when you're in the detail and the senior leadership are in the detail day in, day out, that someone just outside can say, I've seen something different in my setting. Let's interrogate that. Let's make sure that this is on track for where we are, which is really valuable. The one thing I think would be great to build on is then to introduce the other routes that our students go on to. So businesses, training providers, apprenticeship providers would all bring a really interesting angle. So more of those represented, more of those perspectives would be really interesting. And perhaps some of those perspectives from further afield rather than just the local area as well. London is slightly unique, but then also not so unique as being so different to everywhere else. But I think that kind of that diversity would be really interesting, just from a location wise, to get some of those alternative angles as well. But just having that diversity of kind of education interested voices, but from such different settings, has been really valuable. And I think encouraging that can only be a benefit. Probably got a bit of a vested interest working at university, but you'll have to allow me that one.
No, absolutely. No, thanks, Sam. And Hannah, what about you? What about the skills that boards need, and whether they can access those?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the skills that we're asked for again and again: finance, safeguarding, education, HR, the ones that we've talked about already. I've just seen Rosemary's comment in the chat around being prepared to embrace change, and for me as the chair of governors, that's absolutely key. I'm looking for people who are open to change, because we know that the education system is changing all the time, but we're a maintained school. We don't know where our future lies at the moment, whether we're going to, join an academy sooner rather than later, or later rather than sooner. So thinking about all of those processes, I think it's really key to have people who aren't fixed mindset of this is the way it is, that are open to change. And as I say, the education sector is changing so much. Thinking about new ways that we can support the pupils in the school, and really having that fresh perspective is really key.
Excellent. And if you'll permit me as chair, I'll add my own experience where I was brought in as chair of governors for a school, actually that United Learning had just picked up from the local authority, and it was in a bad way. So it was a huge change management program, which obviously was led by the head, but I was able to come in and create a new governing board, which I think really helped the head with that turnaround, and within 3 years the school was outstanding. So I think that's a great example of sort of a mix of skills that came in through the governing board at a very particular time for that school. So just turning our attention now to the sort of the wider sector and indeed to the DFE, because it strikes me that governance was very, very prominent in the noughties, and I feel it's been a bit downgraded in recent years. And I think that's to the detriment of all the good work that's going on, and the incredibly incredible value of this resource. So finally, so what do we have any questions for the wider sector about the role of governance and the governors, but also any messages for the DFE where we could perhaps give greater prominence to governance and just make more of the governors that we have. Hannah, do you want to kick off with this one?
I guess my message is that there's so many people across the country who are giving their time freely to do this. It is a really valuable role, and the school sector relies on those volunteers' time. I think the support between a governing board and a head teacher, speaking from a maintained school perspective, is really key. It's a lonely role, as we know. That support that the governing board can give, as well as challenge and being critical phone, but absolutely being that sounding board is really key. So I think just recognition of everything that governors across the country and trustees obviously are doing would be really it would be a great thing.
Thank you. And Sam, your thoughts?
Yes, I mean, it's such a tough question when obviously there's so much hitting schools and current change, potential change in future, and so many foundational things that are such a challenge. And there is only so far that good, effective governance from all of these perspectives can aid schools in their journey when there are so many challenges hitting them. But I think a recognition that governors can play such an important role in the success of a school, in the success of that school, meeting the challenges of the local area. These governance boards are bringing together some really key stakeholders from those local areas, who know so much better than anyone else, anyone in a central position, what's going on the ground in that community with those young people, with the next generation of people in that community who are going to be working, living, making those decisions. There's something there for me around how we make use of those skills, how we trust those people to kind of shape the future of their area, who are already giving their time to schools, but how do we enable them without placing too much pressure on them to really have that impact, to maximize their impact, not just in the school, but in the network of schools around them in that local area, which is more of a hope for the future rather than necessarily a suggestion. But I think there is something there where we've got these keen people, these people with such unique skills and perspectives, a waste if we don't use them.
Thanks. John?
Yeah, sorry, just unmuting. Yes, and I mean, there have been periods in the last sort of 10 years where government has paid much closer attention to questions of governance, perhaps focus more on trust governance than anything else, at moments where various trusts have got themselves into sort of high profile difficulty, and the question of how do we make sure the education sector has proper governance is comes to the fore. But I mean, I tend to agree there's a risk that governors and the governor contribution gets overlooked in a lot of policy making, and people think of schools and they think immediately of the head and of what the head thinks of things, and that's obviously understandable because the head's job is to run the school, but it misses a trick. Thinking back to the early years of this century, there were a couple of things we did when I was in the DFE which I think were particularly successful in engaging governors in a quite powerful way. One that's always stuck in my mind is that working with a group of schools which we saw as potential coasting schools that didn't necessarily have low attainment but did have low progress for young people, and holding a sort of conference for those schools, the decision was made to invite not just the head but also a governor to come to that conference. And by inviting a governor as well, it really radically changed the dynamic of the conference. It got rid of a lot of defensiveness. It created a dynamic in which conversations about what the data was showing about the performance of the schools that were there, made governors think, hang on a minute, we can and should be doing better than this, and turned the conversation quite quickly into a very positive direction about, right, here's a good challenge to us. How are we going to make ourselves better? How are we going to engage with the support that's on offer? And and it's obviously not true that heads are all defensive, because I mean clearly that's not the case, but the dynamic of having the governor and the head together, the governor feeling that they were representing the children and the community and holding the head and the senior team to account, really mobilized a sense of action and possibility and yes we can, in a very powerful way. And it's a small example, but I think it's a really good example of how engaging governors in the right way when thinking about policy and school improvement can be extremely powerful, not because governors bring, you know, huge expertise in school improvement. They might or might not have that background, but because they bring an attitude and a frame of reference and a mindset, which is, okay, if people are saying we can be better and giving us evidence that we can be better, we'd better get better, hadn't we? And then bringing that attitude and challenge to heads in a really positive way. So I think you're absolutely right. I think it's very easy for policymakers not to think enough about governors. And I also think it's very easy when they do think about governors to think about really high leverage things that can be done, which involve governors in really accelerating the progress that happens. So I think it's a really important point and a really important area for policymakers to think about.
Thank you. We're sort of coming to the end of the session. We've got some interesting comments coming through, questions about professionalization of governance. Can we rely on volunteering in the future in light of time and income constraints? And then Cleo saying that feel that chairs ought to be remunerated. And then Sandra is saying it's time to demystify the role of governors. Consideration should be given as to how the profile can be raised. So we've just got time to go to quick round, everyone. One final thought before we wrap up. So Asif, I'll come to you first.
Yeah, I've only been a governor for a year, and I think I didn't understand the importance of a governor until I became one. So I feel that if you have the opportunity to be a governor, if your time allows you to do it, I think it's a great opportunity. For me, it's been a great journey. I still feel that I'm learning, and I still feel that I'm at the start of my journey as a governor. So hopefully onwards and upwards.
Great. John?
A final thought. I suppose really that I think there's a danger that, as we've just discussed, that the wider system underestimates the potential and the impact of governors. I think it's really important that governors don't underestimate their own potential and potential for impact. And I think sometimes because, you know, people adopt a role as a governor as a sort of public service and see it often as developmental for them, perhaps, as well as other things. You know, it's a role for people who have some humility, I think, and that's great. But I think it's really incredibly important that governors, you know, retain the sense of energy, ambition, possibility for their school, and don't think for a minute that they don't have huge influence. It's one of these roles where you might control very little. You know, there's not much that you're absolutely in charge of and controlling, because you're non-executive, but it's a role where your ability to influence is enormous, and you should be ambitious about the thought that we can influence for the better, we can challenge people to do better. And even if we don't have the answers ourselves, the fact that we ask the question and express the ambition is incredibly powerful. So don't underestimate yourselves, I suppose, is my message.
That's very good. Sam?
I think the final thought from me would be thinking about the kind of the power and the ability of key organizations, other institutions, universities in kind of allowing, encouraging and enabling their staff and their contacts and their networks to take up roles as governors, particularly those organizations who have a social mission, who have a stake in a local community, by allowing your networks, your staff members to become governors and governance volunteers has such an impact, as we've heard, and it's a really obvious kind of source for schools and trusts to kind of seek out these highly skilled governors who are present in these communities, who are probably looking for these kind of opportunities, and hopefully have the organisations behind them that unlock that possibility too.
Thanks. And Hannah?
I think my point is reiterating Sam's. It's a call to action, really. There are thousands of vacancies on governing boards out there. We need all the people that we can get, and I think those vacancies put added pressure on the people who are already governance, and therefore we risk losing them. So it's really important that we, as governors, spread the word and really make sure that people understand the role, that they recognise the impact that they can have, and that they are inspired to take up the challenge.
That's great. So that's the end of the session. Thank you very much. Thank you, John. Thank you, Sam. Thank you, Asif. Thank you, Hannah. And thank you, Jess, who did contribute to the planning of the session. And thank you to all for your comments and thoughts. And I think, you know, we've got a really great group of governors here, and I think we should, as John says, we shouldn't hide our hide our value. So thank you very much.